Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips. And just a couple of announcements. For those of you who are in the Central Ohio area, remember Tuesday is cooking classes, movie nights, potlucks, etc. We have something every Tuesday night until, well, every Tuesday night. And then on Thursday night is Make Americans Free Again gatherings at our office. So do join us for one of those if you're in Central Ohio. And also remember, we have psychological support groups, anxiety and depression, COVID-related anxiety and depression, and an adolescent group. And we start new groups all the time to accommodate people who really need this kind of support. So don't forget about that. And then remember, we have all kinds of new classes coming up next year in addition to the dozens and dozens we already offer, things like headaches and migraines and ADHD and epilepsy and seizure disorders, communication and problem solving, pregnancy, HIV, AIDS, hepatitis, atrial fibrillation, and so on. So always new things going on. We have, I think we're up to like, I don't know, a couple thousand hours of video content and a couple thousand referenced articles on everything from kidney stones to stage 4 cancer treatment. So lots to learn if you're interested in learning. And we have wonderful packages that make learning from us really, really affordable. One other thing I'll mention about this is normally I take the last couple, 3 weeks of the year off in terms of teaching classes and that sort of thing, but to support our membership who really need connection, I think everybody does during this whole thing, I'm going to continue to do my Q&A sessions. I'll just do one every week through December so that we have a place for people to connect. We're trying to provide as many of those opportunities as we possibly can because we think it's really helpful. We know it's helpful. You guys tell us it's helpful, so that's why we're doing it. So I want to talk today about COVID-19 and chaos, all right? So you may have heard of Jordan Peterson. He's the author of 12 Rules for Life, a great book if you haven't already read it. He recently emerged after a period of time of not being in the public eye to discuss a personal life event. And I think that some of the things that he talks about and mentions are really apropos to what a lot of us are experiencing in this COVID-19 mess. So here's what happened. Peterson's wife, Tammy, was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he experienced what he's been writing and lecturing about for the last several years, which is the collapse of order and the emergence of chaos. Well, I don't know any better word for what we're going through right now than chaos. In his situation, order in his life was the stability of his marriage. And in fact, in the 12 Rules, he wrote that Tammy, his wife, had been, quote, the absolute pillar of honesty, stability, support, practical help, organization, and patience. And on the other hand, what happened after she was diagnosed was chaos, and he describes that as the new place in time that emerges when tragedy strikes suddenly. And it's the new and unpredictable suddenly emerging in the midst of the commonplace and familiar. It's the place you find yourself when things fall apart. And I think that's what everybody's experienced, like the whole world around us has fallen apart. And we're hanging on to the pieces that haven't, which include even connection to one another through videos like this, right? So there's a happy ending to Peterson's story. His wife didn't die, but while he was dealing with the chaos, he had a crisis. The actual crisis wasn't that his wife died, it's that he got addicted to benzodiazepines. And it's a horrible addiction, by the way. He actually traveled throughout North America. He even went to Eastern Europe and Russia looking for a way to stop the benzo, but stopping the benzo is one thing, but the withdrawal symptoms are horrific. He suffered from delirium, time distortion, and physical impairment such that he couldn't even go up and down the stairs at some points in time. And he describes withdrawal from the benzo as being actually worse than death. Well, those of you who've been reading my articles and watching these videos and who have listened to Peter Breggin, one of my good friends and business partners, know that psychiatric drugs are useless and dangerous and addictive. And Peterson's lucky. He actually was able to withdraw from this drug because not everybody can actually accomplish withdrawal. But his comments about the whole experience, again, are so applicable to what we're all dealing with right now. He says, when the world remains known and familiar, our emotions remain under control. Well, it's easy to have everything under control when everything is just great. But when the world suddenly transforms itself into something new, our emotions are dysregulated. And he further refers back to his book and says, life is suffering. There's no more basic, irrefutable truth. And this is what we're all dealing with. Our personal worlds have been transformed into something new. And while you can talk to people who say that it's actually better, they like working at home, I mean, there are some good things to be said about all of this. But I think the vast majority of people feel that their lives have been torn apart in ways that they wish hadn't happened. And as I was talking about yesterday, frayed relationships and all the other stuff that goes along with it. As for what to do in response, he says the easy option is to pursue pleasure and happiness and to live for the moment. Well, that's happening right now with COVID. More drugs, more alcohol, more junk food. I mean, we've started referring to the health consequences of the bad eating and bad drinking as the COVID 25, sort of like you refer to the freshman 15 when kids go off to college, right? Of course, the consequences of drug and alcohol abuse can go way beyond weight gain and even lead to death. And we're seeing a lot of that happening as well. So, not surprisingly, Peterson advises against just pursuing happiness and pleasure as an antidote to life's difficulties, and I would echo that in response to this as well. He says a deeper meaning is required and that happiness is a great side effect, but not an end in itself. It's fleeting, and when treated as the goal, leads to feelings of failure. And what you really need to do, he advises, and I agree, is to rely on deeper meaning to sustain yourself through difficult times. He provides several answers that I totally agree with. One is personal radical responsibility. In his case, it was dedication to his family and also to his work. In fact, during the time that he was going through this personal hell, he wrote a lot of his next book. And he said, responsibility is what gives life meaning, and a life of meaning can weather a storm of suffering. And I think that some people have to find new meaning in life after a disruption like this, but eating chocolate and drinking wine is probably not the better choice as opposed to finding new meaning in life. So perhaps the place to start is to adopt radical and personal responsibility, which can also be referred to as purpose. That's what's sustaining me. I mean, I think my life's purpose right now, in addition to the things I was doing before all of this, which I continue to do, informed medical decision making, diet and lifestyle change, is to rebuild, help the affected people who are dealing with this right now, and continue to expose the truth, and then at some point in time start rebuilding to restore the world. And we are going to come out with a new program very soon through Make Americans Free Again that will go to that. We're going to start rebuilding before total collapse, and I'm kind of excited about that, so stay tuned. Now, your purpose could be tied to mine. Maybe what you've done is you've joined Make Americans Free Again, and you're helping us, and that's your purpose. It could also be something entirely different. And many of you have written to me about how you found purpose and how you're helping people. And so there are lots of ways to do it, not just the way I'm doing it. But the key is we all do need purpose. And I think that when people lose purpose, they lose their reason for living, and that's what we're seeing happen right now. It's a lot of where the disaster is coming from. Support is also important. Peterson received it from family. Many of the rest of us don't have that option, so we're getting it from friends and new friends we've met while navigating the chaos. And I think we've all experienced this. I have. I've lost many members of my former tribe, but I've also gained many new friends. And in many cases, the relationships and connections are actually more genuine and quite a bit deeper than the ones I left behind, because we're not dancing around one another trying to avoid difficult topics or not to offend persons, people. So some of those connections are actually better, and I expect will grow into deep and lasting friendships once this is over that will last for the rest of our lives. Peterson makes an important point, and I like this: with love, encouragement, and character intact, a human being can be resilient beyond imagining. Now, the most important statement to me in that statement is character intact. When this is all said and done, those of us who stood by the truth and refused to do what was easiest to go along to get along, so I talked about yesterday, that the writer basically said, I didn't just do the easy thing. I took the harder way out, which is to stand up for what I really knew was right. So we've stood for something, and our character at the end of this will be intact. And we are doing it against remarkable resistance from people who refuse to look into the matter at all. I mean, let's face it, you don't have to look very far into the matter. 3 or 4 phone calls or websites or studies is all it takes to get to the place where you should be questioning this. So when we're talking about people who are screaming at us, It's a willful ignorance. It's deliberate ignorance. I want to stay ignorant is what it is. And so we have, and they've been loud about it, but my character is intact. I've done what's right. I have not caved to it, to go along, to get along, to just maintain a relationship. Because why? Because it's always been there. It's been there for decades. Well, it's not there now. It can't be there now if that's the price of having it. That's my opinion anyway. Last but not least, Peterson expresses gratitude, especially to his daughter and to his family, for help during the crisis. And as Peter Breggin has often said, it's just almost impossible to feel depression and despondence when you are in a place of gratitude. So it's important. So purpose and character and gratitude are the keys to survival in this and in all situations. Some of us have faced some pretty awful things in the past, and we've gotten to learn those lessons. That's how we survived. And so we knew to do this when this came about. One day when I write my autobiography, or somebody else writes my biography, I'll do the tell-all thing. And my life has not been all wine and roses, I'll tell you that. But so I've been able to draw on prior experiences to bring me through this. I've always thought everything comes out in the end. And in fact, a friend of mine, during one of my worst crises, a time when I can't even begin to tell you how terrified I was about a lot of things, he said, everything comes out okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end, So I've kind of applied that to this. Some of you are experiencing your first awful episode in life. And if that's the case, then I think the place you might want to start is to express gratitude that you got to whatever age that you are. And this is the first time that things have been awful for you, because sometimes awful things happen to people at a pretty young age, So regardless, I think we just need to remind ourselves daily to remember our purpose, protect our character, and to express gratitude. It's how we're going to survive this mess. It's how we're going to be able to look back maybe in a year or two and say, what a horrific mess that was. I am certainly glad it's over, and I don't ever want to experience anything like it again. But we survived it. We actually found a way to thrive, and we found a way to make the world a better place in spite of all of it. So I hope those are helpful words. As usual, pass this on to anybody who you think might enjoy watching it and learning more about all of this, and I'll be back to you tomorrow with more news.